everyone, and welcome. My name is Marieme Foote, and I will be interviewing Judy Guskin today. So to begin, it's a great honor for me to be here with one of the people credited with mobilizing and getting people motivated and going for the establishment of the Peace Corps. Without individuals like her, we may not have Peace Corps that we have today. So we thank you and we honor you for all of the hard work you have done. So thank you.
Okay. It is a real pleasure. I feel honored to meet anybody who has involved themselves with the Peace Corps. Every one of us has had an individual experience in a different part of the world. And I've not met anybody yet who didn't say it was a life-changing experience. For me, being an activist as a student was very important. And getting some results as quickly as I got at 20 years old in terms of setting up the Peace Corps set me on to a life journey of activism motivated by my Peace Corps experience. And I worked for many, many years with refugees coming from Southeast Asia because I was in Thailand and I spoke Thai, and with all kinds of different people who came to America, as well as with desegregation issues in the schools. So while I took its time out after meeting Kennedy and dropped out of my graduate training, I returned again later, got my PhD in educational psychology, and I'm so grateful that I had the kind of career and life experience that started all on October 14th, 1960.
Thank you. So tell us about that night.
Well, this was the first year in 1960 that we had TV presidential debates. And that was a chained item for the engagement of people who had not been engaged before. So I was watching with friends the third debate. John Kennedy looked better. I preferred him to Nixon, but I wasn't quite sure yet, nor did I have a deep knowledge of what was going on in the world. But I knew certain things, and that debate dealt with our foreign policy. And it does reflect today in many, many ways. Our country was very divided. We had concerns about Russia, especially in terms of nuclear proliferation and nuclear arsenals. We had concerns with China, and the two candidates discussed that very much so. I think Kennedy was a little worried, his aides say, that he would be coming off too much as a hawk or as somebody who was maybe not a hawk enough. So those were the kinds of issues they talked about. The times were such that students had become to be very active because the civil rights movement had just really begun full-fledged in the South. The sit-ins, the Woolworth picketing because of the lack of respect for students who went into there to have lunch, merely to have lunch, set off a spate of activities throughout the country as well as in Ann Arbor. So we knew about that. I was on a picket line about that. We realized also that we were divided. Some students were more progressive than others. And both ends of the spectrum, the right and the left, formed organizations to be active during those years. The Students for Democratic Society on the left and the Young Americans for Freedom were the conservative group. So we were worried about the future. We were looking for inspiration. We especially liked the fact that this was a young person in his 40s who said that we mattered, who said that what we did was important and that we had to get involved and to participate. Michigan also in that crowd had many international students. So what happened, I don't know who was there, they say 10,000 people were waiting. We waited there, it was cold, it was miserable. I remember the cold and the drizzle, but still the crowd was happy to be there and excited, but we didn't know when he would come. The dean of students kept coming on and saying, okay, you can stay an hour more. Okay, you can stay a little longer. Finally, she said, okay, stay as long as you want. And so there was no curfew. He arrived tired at 2 a.m. He really came to go to sleep and hadn't intended to give a speech. But he came and we were all excited and we were all chanting. And he stood at the door of the student union looking at all these thousands of faces. There was no way that he could leave. So he said, I'll give a short speech. At the end of it, he said, that's the longest short speech I ever gave. He pointed to us and he said, you have skills. You might be doctors, you might be technicians, you might be teachers. Would you be willing to give years of your life to go to Ghana? Maybe half the crowd didn't even know where Ghana was. He said, you are needed. You have to go and help those who need to be moving into a new reality, which was a freedom, okay? Why did he pick Africa? Nobody knew for sure at the time, but I believe I know. He was the chair of this subcommittee on Africa in the Foreign Relations Committee. And he had been to Africa and he had given his own money to bring African students to America to study. He was very impressed with the people he met. There were meetings in Africa, in Ghana. That was where the alliance of the African countries, the first alliance, had their first real meeting, okay? One of the people he personally gave money to was from Kenya, one of the young activists. Another person who came at that time to study was Barack Obama's father. So that fit into what he wanted to see for Africa. There were 36 new countries at the time. It was a very, very exciting time. And I believe that's why he was so involved with it. He knew that colonialism, and had said before, as a patriot, that colonialism was wrong. And Africa had been totally chopped up and divided among the European countries, except for Ethiopia. That was not colonized. And the place I served with Taiwan as a Peace Corps volunteer, Thailand was also not colonized. So when he left, there wasn't a clear idea of what could happen next. We were waiting, we were looking at what could happen. My heart told me that I was going to vote for him. That was my first vote for a president. But Chester Bowles came, and Chester Bowles was a representative, and Chester Bowles talked for the campaign. And he said, my son, Sam, and my daughter-in-law, they're in Nigeria right now. That was the final moment. And so I went with my then husband to a Greasy Spoon restaurant and wrote on a napkin. And what we wrote is, we have faith that this is a moment that we have to do something about, that this is something we have to get out, we have to organize. And we put our phone number on the letter, and the phone kept ringing off the hook. And we brought the letter to Tom Hayden, the activist, whom some of you may have heard of. Tom Hayden was editor of the Michigan Daily. He was 19 years old. And we said, you have to publish this. Of course, he said right away, you can't tell me what to do. But he did. And we started. We said in the letter, tell your friends, tell your friends, tell your acquaintances, find people you know on other campuses. Go for it. Let's get this done. And that led to major petition being circulated. We had 1,000 signatures in 2 weeks. The faculty cooperated too. They stopped the classes and people passed the petition. One of the people who signed it was a student, and her mother worked for the campaign. That was lucky. Millie Jeffrey, an amazing woman, okay, who worked for the unions, for the UAW. got in touch with Ted Sorensen of the Kennedy campaign and told him what we were doing on campus. And Ted, that was the right person at the right time. And he decided then that he would write a speech and Kennedy would announce the Peace Corps at the Cow Palace before 20,000 people. And later he said it was the way to bump up that idea, to get it out there.
What advice would you give for those volunteers that were evacuated, for the young volunteers that are coming up right now? And during these difficult times, what are your thoughts about Peace Corps service and the return to volunteers in the field?
The areas of health and public health are going to be very important around the world. The same areas of education won't go away. Girls need to get educated. Specifically, a lot happens when women get education. That is very good for development. My other thought is climate change. There are going to be even more floods. In Africa particularly, I'm really worried because there has been famine in my lifetime, very bad famine. And so with a combination of drought and famine, what are we going to do in terms of food security for people? So there are many things that Peace Corps has already been doing. They may change it slightly. They may build homes that won't flood away or be more sturdy. Maybe schools that have more ventilation when it gets too hot. But the basics will be there probably. And some new ones will come up, I hope, that will help us with climate change, which I do believe is an existential crisis, no question. To all of the volunteers, I say, take opportunities, have patience in some ways, keep learning forever, okay? That's what makes me happy, to see change and to learn more, okay? We didn't stop after our letter. We put together a major conference that December. The people in Washington, and I just learned this, by the way, Kennedy, 2 or 3 days after the inauguration, set up a task force with Shriver. And my friend Harris Wofford was on that task force. But we were just students. They didn't let us know. So what did we do? We pulled together all of the really smart faculty who had experience abroad, and the foreign students came. I was on TV with Ted from Botswanaland, which I'd never heard of. And they came and we sat down and we said, well, suppose it does happen. What really should happen? What are the jobs? And we took reporters sat at each table and we took notes and we published a little book. We mimeographed it probably, and it had a blue cover. I went to work for Peace Corps that summer. I was fortunate enough to be hired to select the first volunteers. And the head of selection said to me, Judy, you know, here, I want to show you something. And he opened his cabinet and he pulled out our book on what we thought the Peace Corps should be like. He said, I want you to know that we had it and we talked about it. So there you go. My feeling is don't give up. Just keep trying. You never know. Sometimes there's some luck. A lot of times there's not, okay? But I think we're at the same moment with Black Lives Matter now that we were with the sit-ins in the 60s. There is a moment to change. There is a moment, it has already changed, okay? Because look who's out there on the streets. It has already changed. Your generation is not the same, okay? So there's more understanding of what America is, not what it was, not some mythology of what it is or what it could be. What it is diverse. It's always had immigrants. It takes Somali refugees, 50,000 of them in the Twin Cities. Go work with them. That's what I did when I came back from Thailand. I worked with the Hmong people. It was a delight, okay? So every moment is a moment of choice, and move ahead. And if things aren't where you can work here, okay, till we get it sorted out with this pandemic, there may be safe places to do things. What about teaching about your experiences online? What about a course online for students in high school? Something like that, okay? Use your imagination and let's listen to what the countries say. We called our group Americans Committed to World Responsibility. And people sort of joked about that. We are not going to succeed unless we recognize that our wealth and our values give us a responsibility to act, and not just for our own sakes, but for the world. Every time I've met with groups of volunteers, it's been thrilling to hear about what they're doing. Some in Portland I met fairly recently were helping some Chinese immigrants who were fleeing religious persecution. And they were getting them working with their local community. Local is local, okay? They were working with local churches to help these new refugees come in. So look for opportunities where you can make a difference, because Saud Shriver was an inspiration. And he always said, by working for others, that's what makes you happy. That's what changes your life. It's by giving, okay? And he was very inspirational for my generation. So inspire yourselves, inspire your others, share the ups and the downs and get it together and help change the world for my grandchildren.
Yes.
I'm from Trinidad, by the way, okay? And my grandchildren who are very concerned about social justice right now and who are just starting college. And I will feel better knowing that you're on it.